Listen up. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to the podcast participants, and not to any participant's employer, organization, committee, or other group or individual. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. You know, for fun. So lighten up and enjoy. Oh, Stomping Jen.
Fun, you say?
Here we are again.
We're going to have fun.
We are going to have fun. I'm super excited for this conversation. We are going to be talking to Thomas Winstanley from Theory Wellness, which is a cannabis medical and recreational operation. They have a series of stores in Massachusetts, one in Great Barrington, one in Chicopee, one in Bridgewater, I think. I'm trying to read my notes. Yep, Bridgewater, and in Maine too.
Cool.
And we have a lot of questions about what they are doing. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's go.
The Soft Serve Podcast.
Creamy, delicious ideas without the creepy truck. All right, Stomping Jen.
All right.
Here we are.
Here we are again.
I have been looking forward to this conversation for quite a while.
Me too.
Let's say hello to our guest, Thomas Winstanley. Hello, Thomas.
Hey, Sawtooth. Stomping Jen, thanks for having me on today.
Thank you for joining us. Let's let Thomas tell us just a little bit more about himself and the Theory Wellness organization.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. And, thanks for having me on today. And, Theory, we are a, vertically integrated cannabis brand started in Massachusetts, started on the medical front. And have since been lucky to find a certain level of success here in the cannabis industry. And not a day goes by that things are the same. Not a day goes by that we're not learning something. I personally have been Theory started in probably 2015-ish. I came on about 2.5 years ago. So I've been with the company for probably like half of its growth, and in the grand scheme of things, it's not all that long. But I've been really fortunate as somebody who's been a very passionate and avid cannabis user for majority of my life, to be able to come into this forefront and not only learn a lot about this industry, but also to help kind of chart the course of the future of cannabis that I think I personally, as a user and a consumer, want to see both on a medical and recreational standpoint. And so it's for me, it's been personally a really exciting journey. For this company, it's been a really exciting journey. We've seen a little bit of everything in a very short amount of time on the forefront of this industry. And unlike most others, you can look at the history of spirits or wine or anything really. This is definitely uncharted territory, and every day it's incredibly exciting, sometimes stressful, sometimes incredibly rewarding, but ultimately for me it's been a pretty wild journey to be a part of this team.
That's awesome. And for our listeners, I want to ask the question because I'm not sure I know what it means. What does vertically integrated mean?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. So back when Massachusetts regulations rolled out, so I think it was in 2000, the short history of it is in 2008, I believe it was, where they decriminalized cannabis possession. And then 2012, it was the approval of medical. 2016 was the approval of rec. Back when medical was approved, part of the stipulation of becoming a medical dispensary in Massachusetts required a provision where you had to be vertically integrated, which basically meant you were developing your entire supply chain. So from the plant, from growing the plant to manufacturing it to processing it and then getting it ready for retail. It wasn't like there was a wholesale market that exists today with the rec market. Vertically integrated means that you're doing everything from growing the plant all the way to manufacturing, all the way to getting it ready for retail.
And I think the term I've heard used to describe that is seed to sale.
Seed to sale process.
Yeah.
And it's an impressive process. Massachusetts being a real leader on the East Coast when it comes to legalization and their approach to doing so. We've had some wonderful case studies out west of the legalization movement. What we are seeing in Massachusetts is every single plant gets a unique ID, and that unique ID and barcode, like a social security number, follows that plant all the way through its journey from seed all the way to the final end product that is sold to a consumer or a patient. So you can look at every single individual plant and see what it ends up being, whether it's an extract or a vaporizer or an oil and an edible. And so for us, we grew into this industry starting with medical first, which really allowed us to establish the brand that we are. And the vertical integration part helps us control our own supply chains, which it's not a requirement now in terms of the rec market. But certainly we've always talked a lot about how medical made us, and medical will always be, the heart of our business in a lot of ways.
That's great. Another kind of personal question. Did you ever envision that you would be able to have a career in the cannabis industry? Like I imagine like so many people who are in this business like might have to step back and like pinch themselves sometimes.
Yeah, actually sawtooth. Like I think probably 18-year-old me is looking at 33-year-old me and like wouldn't believe it if I tried to tell them that I was working for a cannabis brand. And truthfully, I think it is something that it's really hard to express to people who don't have the same passion that I do for cannabis to really express the work that we do. And I think fundamentally that mentality and passion is shared with most employees within our company. Having come from a background of marketing and advertising, you kind of jump around and you learn about different product categories. You learn about different business challenges. I mean, you look at different verticals and you learn how to, the sociology of a buying consumer and try to give them what they're looking for in a lot of ways. This industry is just so intuitively different from every rule that I've ever been taught in terms of market strategy and what it means to build a strong brand. And I consider it a massive, a privilege and a blessing to be working with a company and finding it when I did. So I joined probably almost 6 months before rec started. And so working directly in med was the deep dive that I needed, because I thought as a cannabis consumer, I was one of those people who thought I knew everything about the plant. I knew everything about cannabis. And actually, when I walked into the industry, I thought, whoa, you don't know nearly as much. You have to go out and you got to relearn some of this stuff.
Yeah. And
so part of the journey for me as a professional is I've actually learned that the educational process will never cease. And at the point that you think you know things, you probably know less than you actually do. And so for me, it's incredibly fulfilling because this is where I've been able to amalgamate a lot of professional experiences with a lot of personal experiences into something that I'm incredibly passionate about. And I think that's, in a lot of ways, I think that's what a lot of people seek. And I feel fundamentally very lucky to have joined this industry. That's not to say it's not without its like crazy challenges and weird situations that emerge. And so just to give some context too, so my role as the VP of marketing, so I get to kind of oversee all of the brand related work from communications with consumers and patients. I spend a lot of time design and copy. I spend a lot of time looking at our retail stores and pretty much just thinking about the experience that we want our consumers and patients to have. And so that to me is like this huge responsibility that probably keeps me up at night more than anything about it. Are we doing a good enough job to create this experience? That we are a young company. I mean it when we say we want to actually create the future of cannabis that we all want. And so to be somebody who helps kind of oversee the brand and helps kind of steward us into these new growth areas and improvements. At the same time, I also kind of part of that responsibility is overseeing customer service, which I think is probably one of the least attended to facets of an organization in the cannabis industry. This kind of melding of all of this stuff, it really is a true dream come true to be able to work in.
Cool.
That's awesome. And I want to talk a little bit about the plant itself now. In my Googling and research, Stomping Jen and Thomas,
Googling.
Yeah, I discovered that anthropological evidence kind of tells us that, people have been cultivating and using cannabis for over 10,000 years. That was pretty stunning to me, in the sense that it seems like it's been around since the origins of human civilization itself. Like, it has followed us all along. And like, there are very few things I feel that have done that, right? Dogs are one of them, right?
Yeah, that's exactly where my brain went too.
Dogs
Yeah.
and
That's
cats,
insane.
Yeah, dogs, and cannabis is another one. And so I want to ask a couple of questions about what makes this plant so special in a way, because clearly there's something special about it because it has followed us over the millennia. And I think one of the things that people, I think, will pop into their minds when they think about cannabis is THC, right? Can you tell us a little bit about what that is, Thomas, when we're talking about cannabis and we see and read about THC?
Yeah, so THC and CBD are the two target molecules that have very much brought cannabis, 10,000 years later into vogue into society as we know it today. And I honestly, Sawtooth, I can't agree more with the sentiment that this plant is very special to be with us today in the way that it is. And in my opinion, finally getting the limelight that it is probably much deserved and overdue. And part of the reason why we've now seen this, in my opinion, is the reason we've started to see this shift into kind of this mainstream adaption that we start to see through political voting to adoption of medical practices, comes back to these target molecules that have really helped shape it. So the THC is what brings on the psychoactive properties that also have medical properties. This is the expression of the plant that when consumed and it gets into your bloodstream, those molecules start to help you feel things like euphoria, stress relief, anxiety relief, all of these medical practices or treatment approaches that people come to know and love. But then also you have the complementary, entourage suite of things like it can help enhance activities, whether it's reading a book or exercise. And so it is this THC helps kind of bring these adaptive properties that both have an impact, both medically as well as socially. And so when you take the THC, you combine it with the CBD, which obviously is probably more widely known at this point than THC alone. The CBD as a molecule has some of the more medical properties too of anti-inflammatory. It helps with anxiety reduction. I mean, it's the two of them, and the two of them in unison, in tandem with each other, really create this potent medical treatment effects that have efficacy that even today it's almost hard to speculate on the ability of the plant that we know today. One, because we barely researched this plant. I think we're just really starting to take an empirical comb through the history of this wonderful plant. And really, a lot of it comes down to the two target molecules of THC and CBD, which in a lot of ways we've kind of separated. But I think over the next couple of years, we're actually going to see them work closer together. there's definitely a very binary approach to cannabis in the legal industry right now, which almost creates a separation between the two. But ultimately, the THC has the more psychoactive properties. CBD has a lot of the medical properties without any of the side effects that can come with THC.
Yeah, and that in some ways, there's two things you said I just want to talk about a little bit is people will say, well, there's no research on cannabis, right? And part of that is because there's been this
Ban.
unreasonable prohibition
Right.
on the plant for many, many decades, So we haven't been allowed to really thoroughly research cannabis in an extensive way in this country. And the other thing is because it's a plant, right? It's a plant medicine, right? In a lot of ways, in certain certain pharmaceutical companies have tried to recreate the THC in the form of a pill, or they say, well, we don't need the plant because we have the pill, right? I think
we can synthesize this.
We've synthesized,
make lots of money on this,
And
right.
I think what I want to seize upon what Thomas was saying. I think in some ways we don't really understand entirely maybe the therapeutic interplay between all of the different elements of the plant itself. So so for those pharmaceutical companies that tell us we don't need the plant, right? They don't even know, right? They don't even know what they're saying.
Well, because they want to make money. They can't make money if they just have a plant. I mean, they can make money, but
are there other compounds in cannabis that are important in terms of either selling it or in terms of people using it recreationally or medically?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is kind of where, so I think what I shared about THC and CBD is the target molecules. I think that's the surface of where I personally came into the industry. And I was like, oh yeah, of course, this is a good plant. But I honestly didn't really understand the extent to which the benefits of this plant are almost unparalleled. So the best way that I've kind of tried to frame this to folks who are passionately trying to understand this plant is, if you think of THC and CBD as the foundation or the framework for a house, right? They are the framework, they are the drywall, they are everything that you need to build a 3-story house. The parts that start to create even broader nuance for efficacy come in the form of terpenes. And so the terpenes is something that I think a lot of legal markets are starting to put more weight around. And the terpenes can be the things that are, the terpenes are basically the aromatics and some of the makeup that help create the differentiation between the different types of plants. So, one of my favorite things about, this is going to go off on a quick tangent here, but one of my favorite things about the cannabis plant is you have something that's grown in South America that has really, really leggy, high standing plants with really narrow, razor thin leaves. That's a cannabis plant. But then if you go to, northern, Afghanistan, you're going to find squat little versions of the same plants with really wide leaves, right?
Yep.
Basically describing an indica and a sativa, which are two different variations of the same plant.
And the sativa is the taller, more spindly phenotype of the plant, right?
Yeah. And so if you look at the same plant and you say, okay, well, this plant looks entirely different from this plant, even though this is the same plant, the THC and the CBD, those, in theory are very much, the same molecules. Those molecules aren't varying. But to get back to the house analogy, what makes the two plants different are the terpene profiles. And the terpenes, if you're looking at the house that is created out of THC and CBD, the terpenes are the interior design and the interior decorating that creates the different vibes of the plants. So South American, land race that's a Panama red or something is going to have a racier, more euphoric, probably is going to be a little bit earthier tasting, probably going to bring more of that euphoric energy that's going to be mentally stimulating versus an indica from northern Afghanistan, which is going to be much more sedating, much more physical, much more body heavy. And so the variation that you have, you're still getting THC and CBD, but the terpenes are what are helping actually create the expression. And so when you look at the medical implications of the variation of the plants, I mean, we're talking at a scale of a very, very long road that we're just starting to go down, where we're looking at what do certain types of genetics of cannabis plants. What are the efficacies of certain types of plants grown in one region compared to plants grown in another region? And then what happens when you say, okay, well, I really like this expression of an indica from, Nepal. And then you run that against something where you like the uplift of something from, from Florida, from the Black Triangle down there. What happens when you combine these things? Are you creating designer plants? Are you taking the best parts of different things to apply them? And then, within each of these profiles too, of these terpenes, you have things like myrcene and linalool and pinene, and these are different terpenes that exist in different types of these plants. And so the medical efficacy of each of these terpenes has a different effect. So a great example is I had a guy who reached out recently through customer service who had bought a strain called Frank's Gift, which is a CBD leaning strain that was high in CBDA, which is activated CBD. Mm-hmm. And it was the first time that this guy, who's a diabetes patient, had reached out and he said, this plant just changed my life. And what we found was that, it was the CBDA and some of the terpenes of this specific plant that helped create engage circulation in his feet, where hair started to grow again in a place where he had no circulation. And so I think what we're starting to see, and I think this is what excites me probably the most about this industry, is the more we can learn about this plant and study it and understand the nuance. We know it at a very surface level now, but I think over time, as we start to dig a lot deeper into this, I think we're going to see a lot of different parts of efficacy start to show through. And I think we get glimpses of this if you follow the news and you see, like, oh, cannabis is helpful with PTSD, or cannabis can help with Crohn's, or cannabis can help with, name any medical condition. Yeah. And I think the more we start to learn about this plant and let the plant educate us, I think we're going to continue to see a broader adoption of cannabis as a whole. And I think it goes a lot deeper than just THC and CBD. And personally, that's where I actually get the most excited about of where we head.
Yeah. And we're starting, I think, culturally to see some of that resistance to the cannabis plant begin to crack. I think it was just a few weeks ago, Congress, at least it was the House of Representatives, passed a bill called the MORE Act. Can you talk a little bit about that for us and what that means for us?
Yeah. So, the MORE Act is I believe it's the bill to repeal or to push for a federal legalization of cannabis. And, I think it made it through the House. I don't think it's going to make it through the Senate. I think it's definitely going to get stonewalled pretty hard from certain political affiliations. But what that act actually does signify is, first off, I don't think it's going to be the bill that then legalizes cannabis straight out. Like, I don't think the time is right now. I don't think we're ready for it. I think we're working towards it. If there's any takeaway, though, I think it is a symbolic representation coming out of an election, not only a month ago, where we really saw a very, very large shift in public sentiment around public support around cannabis. And I think the MORE Act may not be the final bill that makes it to, the floor of Congress or makes it to the executive branch for a final sign-off. I certainly think it becomes a symbolic gesture and a representation of the state of the union of the entire body of the United States residents that are finally saying, I think it's 64% support of legalization. And, unfortunately, I think part of the narrative is our people are starting to see the amount of money that is in cannabis right now. And I think people are also feeling the urgency to get in on it. When you see guys like John Boehner, who's on the board of Acreage Holdings, who is the former Republican Speaker of the House, sentiments are definitely changing. The guy also said that he's never used cannabis before. So, take that for what it will. That being said, I do think the MORES Act becomes a symbolic piece of legislation that has made it farther than any have before. And I don't think it's the last either.
Yeah, I mean, at its basest level, it at least is a signal for a call,
testing the waters.
yeah, or for a call to the end of this prohibition.
Right.
I'm curious, Thomas, and not to get too deep into history. This isn't a test, I promise. I'm just wondering if you can. I'm just wondering
my best.
if you can educate me or any of our listeners on how we ended up in this situation where cannabis was ranked among the deadliest drugs known to man, and people are serving life sentences. Reefer madness. Like, how did we end up in this incomprehensible, unfair prohibition against this plant?
Yeah, honestly, I think there are probably better resources than me if you really want to deep dive. A lot of the way that I've come to understand it and accept it is, at the time of prohibition, when alcohol started to come back into vogue, and they were making the decision back in the 1920s to move forward with bringing alcohol, repealing the prohibition around alcohol. There was also a movement of what else are we going to restrict? And so cannabis became the next kind of low bar for entry, where they said, well, let's call it marijuana. Let's give it a Mexican sounding name. Let's turn our focus. Let's turn our resources. So, this is a continuation of the war on drugs that started with the prohibition of alcohol that has now since continued to today. There was this massive sentiment where folks said, okay, well, if you guys are going to have your alcohol, then we're going to restrict, the cannabis plant. Yeah. And the irony of all of this stuff is this is a plant that in the foundation of our nation we were growing because it provided clothing. It provided shelter. I mean, it provided a whole host of things, and people were also consuming it back then as well. Yeah. And so it is an unfortunate, there's a form, in my opinion, it's an unfortunate blemish on the history of kind of the emergence of the modern society that we live in today, that we made a bad decision around a plant and are just coming to rectify 200 years later the instance in which we have prohibited it. Yeah. And the outcost of doing so, I think, is, something that, to come back to theory a little bit, is something that we are very conscious of. We're very conscious of the impact that this has had socially.
I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, particularly as a marketing professional in this business, like that must be baggage that you think about in terms of having to overcome, like these years of negative cultural perceptions around the plant. And like, is that something you grapple with and have to think about, reframing the story about cannabis for, current customers who might feel guilt associated with using the plant, and even potential customers who those conceptions about the plant that they have are barriers of entry into the marketplace?
Yeah. So this is a very difficult question to answer, because I think it is one that I'm still trying to answer every day.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of layers in this dialogue that create complexities. Is there a challenge of, at a fundamental level, we are still selling. I have made a professional career of selling something that is a class 1 felony, is a class 1 substance. So you start there, and, as you start to go down that funnel, you learn, a lot of these things about, okay, well, if somebody's going to come buy cannabis legally for the first time, how do we get it right? what do we need to do to get it right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the ingredients for a successful first time visit to a cannabis dispensary, whether you are a medical patient or a recreational customer? But then even deeper, there are bigger questions that we are seeking to answer as a company of, okay, well, we are now making a profit off of something that there are, thousands of people incarcerated over.
Yeah.
We are now in a place of privilege to sell this plant. Many before us have sold this plant, no different from what we're doing. I mean, it's different, obviously, for a variety of reasons, but fundamentally, there are a lot of people who are incarcerated around this. There are a lot of very deep-seated racial inequities that are created around this plant. And so part of our responsibility in this movement is to figure out, okay, we know all of these things. So how do we try to consciously move through this very, very, it's challenging to the extent that there is so much baggage around buying an eighth of weed. Everything from what you call it, what you label it, who you buy it from, where it's cultivated, what are the practices, to what are the social implications of what we're doing. And so I think as a marketer, and as a consumer, and as somebody who loves this plant as much as I do, we think a lot about those questions, and we think a lot about what the answers could potentially be to them. And I don't think we have them yet. I think we're actively seeking them, but ultimately we know that this is a plant that is fraught with a ton of unwarranted baggage. So how do we start to move forward? So how do we start to progress? How do we start to kind of, how do we acknowledge the past while moving forward to create the future we want to see?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we always are looking at. Whether it is a retail experience, when you walk into a store, how do you want to feel? Is it more like a museum where you're getting educated on something you didn't know about and things are on display and it's bright and it's clean? Is it more like an apothecary where you go in, or a pharmacy where you go in and you pick up your prescription to help you with your migraines? Or is it like a wine shop where you're going to a dinner party and you want to bring a really great strain that's not going to freak everybody out, before appetizers are served?
Right.
And so I think, this is the landscape that I find, probably my favorite part of this pursuit is we have to navigate this very sensibly and very logically, trying to be considerate of so many different moving parts. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge at times of this industry is, political issues are one thing. I think, people's stigmas about it being the devil's lettuce and jazz cabbage and all that stuff is another. But I think we also know that we're really fortunate to be where we are doing what we do. So how do we start to create a conscious model as a cannabis brand to help try to bring people along with us and not end up as, big corporate cannabis, which I think is the concern for a lot of people these days.
Yeah.
So that's a long-winded answer, but I think it hopefully, it conveys a little bit of some of the thought process of what we deal with every day and who we want to be.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer. Thank you. And the thing,
do you like brainstorm with other companies, or because I know it's been legal in states out west for quite some time. Do you coordinate with those folks? Do you keep more to just in state? Is the Cannabis Commission that's in charge of taking care of all that for the state? Do they help with those things? Like, do they bring you guys together to brainstorm these types of issues and challenges for the industry?
Somewhat. So I think, I think the difference, or it's not even a difference, the Western states are a much more mature market than we are. Mm-hmm. They certainly, the way that we've come into a legal market is very different from how they entered into a legal market. The guardrails are very different. But I think the overall premise of what we're doing as an industry as a whole, there actually is surprisingly a lot of collaboration, or at least just like it's non-competitive, just engagement that we all have. Where, I reached out to the CEO of like a company that I thought was just amazing, like a cannabis brand. And I was like, I love this brand. I saw the guy popped up on my LinkedIn feed, and I said, holy smokes, like that's the dude from this brand. I wanted to reach out and just tell him I love what he's doing. And I reached out. He wrote right back to me, and he was like, dude, I also feel the same way about what you guys are doing. Like, stay in touch. And so I think that to me is kind of this, like, that's what we want more of, is this kind of interconnectedness. But I also think there's a part of the way that I think a lot about, and we think insularly about our brand, is that I think because the industry is so new, there are parallels that you can draw from people who are doing the same things. But at the same time, we also want to take a very more specific approach to meet our needs. Because like getting through every day can be a challenge. And so when it comes to developing or adopting new programs around sponsorships or local involvement, that kind of stuff, we're still trying to figure it out. And I think when you look at, to look at the broader picture of equity, just global equity in the industry, I don't think that's an answer. I don't think that's a question that's been answered really well. And I don't think that any industry or any company really in cannabis has dialed that in to the truest extent that it should be. And so it is a little bit of both, where we do like to draw from people who are doing what we're doing, but also we like to think about what makes the most sense for us at this point, given the circumstances.
What I think is really interesting about this industry, and stopping Jen here is the one of us with an MBA, so I'm going way out on a limb here. Is I think because of the federal status of the plant right now, it hasn't allowed huge corporations to come in across the country and dominate the industry like we see in other industries like alcohol. Like, it's allowed these more regional, local businesses on a state-by-state basis to get a foothold and kind of grow.
There's been so many strange approaches to it, though.
Well, but what I'm saying is, like, when I'm trying to think, when Budweiser decides to get into the cannabis industry, like, I think my feeling is people are going to look at that and be like, no, go away. Like, I have Theory Wellness here down the street from me, that I know those people. I can go there, like, and like, do you know what I'm trying to say?
You're talking about the difference between like a boutique and like corporate, like a corporate and local, But I think at some point in the future, when this does become full blown legal across the country, and the consolidation, like you see in any industry, could occur, years from now. But
I'm saying I hope not, right? What I'm saying is what I'm saying is, unlike in the alcohol industry, right? Like the titans got their foothold, and the craft industry has risen up against it, right? In a way.
Yeah, but there was a time when Budweiser was just a small little microbrewery, and there were lots of microbreweries, and what happens is the small fish start to eat the bigger fish, and then they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Right.
I don't know. I have a good feeling that this is going to turn out differently. I know. I just do.
And who has the MBA?
You do. Okay, I know.
No, I mean, what I find interesting is
I have an MBA in optimism, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I want one of those.
Yeah.
Sawtooth. Send me an application. I want to sign up for that too.
I will just give you an honorary optimism degree.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
go ahead.
So I don't know how much I can say here. So like I'm on a local select board here in Belchertown. So, we have marijuana companies that want to move into our town, and they all have these different approaches. And this is the part that, like, it's just so strange to me. Like, people come in, the Cannabis Commission, you have to meet certain requirements or whatever. So that's like in their hands. So at the local level, it's like we have to deal with all these different people, some of which want to do cultivation, some of want to do retail, but they all like have their own approaches to how they're going to do these things. It's been very interesting from that perspective. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure on the other side of the table, it's completely different experience having to deal with municipalities and like trying to get a foothold into a community. I don't know.
Yeah. It's not easy. I mean, I think that's big. I think you're underscoring a really important point about the industry, though, is that it's not easy. And, and Sawtooth, I hate to say it, I think, unfortunately, there is a precedent for a very stark possibility of corporate cannabis that is already here. And and I think that kind of is what that is probably one of my biggest kind of concerns, that of the many things that I have anxiety about, is the future of a free market economy that cannabis exists in. So when you look at programs around opening a cannabis dispensary, you're talking at about a 2-year lead time to get a license.
Yeah.
To get a license, you have to own property in the place where you want to get your license.
Yeah.
You have to get your municipality to sign off on your cultivation, retail, whatever. File the paperwork with the Cannabis Control Commission, build out your space. I mean, we're talking, this is a 2-year project where you are literally spending millions of dollars to get to a point where you hit the starting line. So knowing that this is kind of the lead into the market, you can't get funding from banks, right? So all of your traditional practices of fundraising have to go through this very different approach where valuations are really wonky, because really who knows with the way that the market changes every day. So, I think part of what we've seen in more mature established markets it becomes a game of licenses, where after you've done a lot of that work, somebody with a huge bank account or a privately traded company or what have you, venture capital, private equity, etc. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, we'll give you $4 million to go launch this brand, you keep 51%, we'll take 49%, but we're going to recoup, 80% of your profit margin until you reach your, the inflection point. When you start to think about that, that's a very dangerous proposition. And I think where the challenge within the market is starting to become is that there are companies who are doing that today in Massachusetts. They're doing it in Maine. They're doing it in just about every legal market.
Yeah.
And this is something that is genuinely very concerning to companies like our own. We're independently owned and operated. Like, we have no huge conglomerate parent company that's like blue chip traded stocks. Like, we're not a MedMen, we're not a Curaleaf, we're not this big corporate entity. But those corporate entities are certainly playing in our sandbox with us. And we are very wary of them when they have multiple states that they operate in. And we're kind of bootstrapping everything, along the way. And I think, it's to stomping Jen's point, like, it's almost an inevitability that there are going to be the Budweisers and that there are going to be the, these big companies that just kind of come into the space and say, hey, you guys did all the work, but we'll buy your license from you. And then, we'll have licenses in multiple states versus in just one. And, the irony we feel is that we actually, when we moved into Maine, back in October, everybody accuses us of being a corporate cannabis company, which to me, I like kind of, it's strange to hear that, because I'm like, wait a minute, no, we want to be the exact opposite of this. But I think there is this natural evolution that Jen was pretty adeptly pointing out, that I think we are unfortunately trending in that direction. And I think that's part of the importance that we feel, where we've been trying to promote a free market economy and protect a free market economy, because without competition, boy, do things become very homogenized incredibly quickly. And I think that's what causes the escalation into things like microbreweries and the resurgence of craft beer, which was a reaction to big domestic beer taking over the scene. So I think it's certainly something we think about a lot, and Jen was, hit it right on the head.
And I think the risk of corporatization, right, is a lack of variety and quality, in my mind, anyways, right? And for me, homogenization isn't a good thing, right? Yeah. Like, I like being able to go and try different things and experience the subtle varieties in products.
Well, I think that is the thing that will keep the smaller organizations in business, because you need that knowledge, that in-depth knowledge about the plant, about what they're selling, what it will do. Like you were mentioning earlier about all the different strains and the different like efficacies for different uses, and like having a person who understands that in depth, you know, like how do you replicate that experience? And I think that is the key difference between a Walmart of, you know, pot shops versus like, you know, the small mom and pop industry,
Right.
you know, like
Yeah.
that's the difference.
Yeah. It's interesting. I want to talk a little bit about product,
Yeah.
and the types of products that an organization like Theory Wellness sells. I mean, I think a lot of people, when they think about cannabis, might just think about flower, like, you
Yeah.
know, that you grind up or, you know, put in a rolling paper or a pipe. But there's a lot more to it than that, isn't there? There are a wide variety of products that Theory Wellness sells.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Yeah, there are. And I think we have, you know, somewhere in the vicinity of 75 different in-house products, you know,
Wow.
pretty much across every tier of category that you would find in a common market. And a lot of our approach comes down to in this new age of pairing customers and patients with products that meet them where they are in their journey with cannabis. So if you are a 40-year veteran smoker like my dad, who will never hit a vape ever and will only smoke joints, you know, he's definitely going to stay towards the flower. But then you have my mom, who just like doesn't really care one way or another, but just wants something to help her sleep and doesn't like to smoke, so she eats a little half of a THC edible before bedtime, you know. And so this kind of growth, I think we're kind of going through this renaissance of product categories where we're starting to get much more nuanced in the types of delivery methods, understanding what are the best combinations of product recipes or manufacturing methods to help provide a better experience for our consumers or patients. And so from flower, which is probably the most common even today, sales wise, everybody wants flower. The vaporizers, which have a little bit of a sordid history with a vape ban last year,
Mm-hmm.
those have gone through, you know, a lower barrier for entry as a different way of consumption. But then you have your concentrates, which are for the more experienced consumers. You have edibles that have varying degrees and tiers of titration of effects. And then, you know, the topicals and, you know, all these different things. And we're actually working on an infused beverage that's going to come out in February. That's, you know, a whole new classification of a type of edible. 5-minute onset. It's a rapid 5 milligram hard seltzer that has cannabis infused seltzer. You feel the effects in 5 minutes and it dissipates in about 40 minutes at 5 milligrams.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, you know, every day, I mean, I was on a call today with our chief production officer. And as I was saying earlier, like, every day I'm trying to learn more about these categories. And I think the pipeline for products is probably growing faster than the industry as a whole, which is really exciting because it gives more options for folks who are looking to get into using cannabis or continuing to use cannabis.
It's not like your old school back in the day. Somebody baked up magic brownies and you didn't know what was going to happen if you ate them.
Well, you don't.
Oh gosh!
Not somebody whose name rhymes with schma tooth, is it? You know, I think, one thing I think it's important for people to talk about, like somebody who maybe is thinking about trying a different delivery method, right? Like maybe I want to try a gummy and that person has only, smoked flower before. Like, it's important that they come in and talk to the people at Theory Wellness, right? About the what to expect when they maybe try a different delivery method, because different delivery methods have a different way of being metabolized by the body and different effects, different durations of effects, and are the people who in understanding that maybe the sales process looks a little different right now because of the pandemic, but the sales reps at an organization like Theory Wellness can talk to customers about what to expect, right? And can offer a little coaching in that regard.
Yeah, very much so. So part of the responsibility that we feel in this market is we want to make sure we get this right. The last thing we want is for someone to come into our dispensary and buy something and have a horrible experience and then, they lose the opportunity to have that bond with cannabis. I think that to me would be a great example of us not doing our jobs well if that's an experience that happens. So what we always encourage customers, whether you're a first-time customer or you've been using cannabis for years, depending on whatever your relationship is, if you're not familiar with the legal market, reach out to us, ask us, come in with an intent. And I think that's something where we certainly think about cannabis as a complement or a treatment for something that is already occurring. So regardless of what your intent is, there's going to be something that we can recommend or help you to enhance. So if you have, if you have arthritis in your hands, good CBD topical is going to be a great fit. I'm not going to recommend you smoke a joint of Dank Sinatra or something like that. But if you are someone who's like, hey, I want to try, a vaporizer with my wife and we haven't used cannabis since college, where should we start? Finding a very low dose hybrid that is, take one puff, see how it feels, add more on. You can always do more. You can't walk back and do less. Come up with a game plan. And honestly, I think that's kind of part of the concierge approach that we want to see more of in the industry. Yeah. Because the more educated a consumer is, the more they actually elevate the industry. Because a consumer who has an understanding of these products starts to develop a really good taste and a preference for the products. And that reflects back on us on how do we continue to try to find products to help encourage the effects or the experience that you want to have. And something that I've been really passionate about in this, especially in the time of COVID, is it's really hard to have that face-to-face. One of the challenges I think that we've seen is that we used to have, we had 200,000 customers come through our Great Barrington store the year we opened for Rec. Now, when you think about the number of conversations we had with consumers who are first-time buyers, there's no shortage of education there. COVID, unfortunately, has put a damper on that with the rise of pre-order and, the one-to-one interaction. And so I've actually worked very closely with, the retail teams as well as my customer service teams to create a system where, if consumers have questions, they can literally text us at the store phone numbers. And then I have a team of customer service managers that I work with, all of which have been very heavily trained. Almost all of them have actually come from retail first, who then will help you kind of make the selections, pick products, and it's overwhelming. I mean, I remember going to a cannabis dispensary in Colorado my first time, and I couldn't believe, I had no idea where to start. It was like walking into Wonka's factory. So I think we want to help build. We want you to come out with an awesome. We want you to come out with you eat a product, you're like, holy smokes! I didn't know a movie could be that good. And so I think that's what we're chasing. Or I spent a lot of time in the lines when we had lines talking to consumers, just because there's no better way to get a sense of your audience. And talking to vets who are, from upstate New York, who had never used cannabis before, who find sleep for the first time in 10 years since doing 2 tours in Iraq. I mean, those are the kind of uses of cannabis that I think, that's what we're seeking. And it was because he stopped in, got a recommendation, tried smoking some indica that was really meeting him where he was. And honestly, anytime Granddaddy Purple comes through our shelves, we shoot him a message and say, Terrence, it's back. Come on through. So, I think there's so many different products. It's always really smart for a consumer to be considerate of getting a good recommendation and know what you're in for and be conscious about how you approach it. You don't go to a bar on your 21st birthday and order 5 shots of Jack Daniels. You're going to have a bad time. Yeah. Don't just come to a dispensary and order the highest testing strain, because you might regret that down the road.
Oh, wow. What? I'm just having flashbacks of when we were first dating and we went to Amsterdam.
This was in 1998.
I don't know what year it was.
My gosh. Yeah, back in the Wild West.
Yeah, all I know is we got something called White Widow, and it was had white crystals. That
Yeah.
was,
Oh yeah.
That's up still. You can find that out
Yeah,
there.
that's stuff. That's
still
that's real. I
around.
mean, that's like,
That's a
yeah,
classic
that's
strain.
a bedrock strain.
Yeah.
No, but I just remember like
Yeah.
going into the coffee shops. We didn't know what we were doing. We were like,
Yeah.
what the heck is happening?
Wait,
I-
so you actually that's like a Netherlands strain. Like
Oh,
that's
yeah.
actually one of the
Yep.
the real deal old school mid
Yep.
90s Cannabis Cup winner.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dang, you guys
Yep.
are smoking the most potent.
Oh yeah.
For you.
And what's interesting about that, right,
Yeah.
is I think the prohibition in this country has
Yeah.
bred so much shame around cannabis consumption. When we got there, Stomping Jen had a really
I
hard
had
time
a
just
massive
letting
anxiety
go.
attack about
Where-
getting anything in a coffee shop.
Yeah,
It was
whereas
terrible.
I was just like, whoa.
Like you would get in trouble.
Yeah.
Jen, was that
Oh,
like
yeah.
being?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And you know, and I think
Yeah.
it's really hard to let go of that, and because I think society wants to put so much guilt on
Yeah.
people, right?
No, it's true.
For using this plant. I mean, thankfully, again, some of that ice is breaking, but I still think, like for the recreational market, for example,
Yeah, it's hard to just like feel like you can just go.
people still may feel guilty. And
Yeah.
anytime I've been in a line in a dispensary, you can still see those people who may be there for the first time and are looking around a little sheepishly. You could tell they feel a little nervous. Like, should I be here? Should I feel
Oh, yeah.
bad about being here? And I think, you know, there's a lot of
Yeah.
work to do as a society to say, you know what? It's okay to want to use this plant for recreational purposes. People use alcohol, they use other things, right? This is okay. And I think that's going to, and there are responsible ways to use it, right? It's a different substance than alcohol. And in my mind, it's a
Right.
lot safer and it does a lot less damage to people than alcohol in my mind. But people still need
Yeah.
to be educated.
I mean, it's baggage. I mean, and honestly, Stomping Jen, I for the first 6 months of working with Theory,
Yeah.
couldn't believe. I mean, it was like surreal because I also felt like, is this?
Yeah.
Should I be doing this?
Right.
Like, is this real? Is
Yeah.
this am I on like the biggest like version of like punked TV that this is like some facade that is, you know, masking something there's almost, I still almost today have a little bit of that anxiety that I carry, even though it's a fully legalized market. I don't feel it as much as I used to. And I think for people who are part of, you know, when you look at this concept of cannabis being such a counterculture product, right?
Right.
So, you know, the people who enjoyed cannabis were considered counterculture, even though it was a culture in and of itself. And so I think that this massive kind of shift of mindset and mentality I think it's going away. And I don't think I've felt this probably. I think now I'm seeing Maine come online and New Jersey and Vermont. Now I'm starting to think, well, oh, wait, okay, have we really turned this corner?
Yeah.
And part of the irony is, you know, I said, you know, stand in line and talk to consumers when we had long waits, and I would honestly go out there with our menu, and I'd go up to people and I'd try to break the ice a little bit because people were so like uptight at times about coming to buy cannabis. And you had the people who were just like, yeah, like we're here, like this is amazing. And then you had the people who were like, don't put me on camera. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to look at anybody. I just like want to do this thing and try to get out. But you know, when you go up to them with a binder, you know, of a well-designed menu and you say, hey, is there anything I can help you with here? Can I make any recommendations? You start to see that tension subside.
Yeah.
You start talking with one person and you see 6 other people who would make eye contact slowly start to pay attention. And, you know, I mean, that's a beautiful thing to start to witness. But, you know, don't get me wrong. There's still times when, you know, I use cannabis and I'm like, whoa, are we really doing this?
Yeah.
Is this really still happening?
Yeah.
And I hope, you know, and I think I really do hope that people start to come around, and I certainly hope that some of those feelings start to subside. And, I think some of the inherent conflict that we have in the cannabis industry today is that you're taking a counterculture and you're bringing it into a structured, not, I wouldn't say corporate, but you're taking it and you're moving it into a very, very regulated, fine-tuned box where a lot of the people who were building that foundation originally to build that culture don't always have a shot at the monetization of the cannabis industry. And I think that creates a lot of this inherent tension that we all feel today. But I hope those are the things that we can also work through in the betterment of the industry.
Yeah, and from my perspective, right, a lot of the fears that we were told would come to fruition with the medical legalization and then recreational legalization didn't materialize, right? So I think people are starting to see, hopefully, to your point, Thomas, that there's been a narrative that has been spun over the years that is not bearing out. And one thing I just want to mention that I've been very impressed with from the industry is the emphasis on safety, right? We talked a little bit before about kind of the concierge approach for adults in using the products, but I think also in making them safe for children. Stomping Jen and I are parents, and the few times I've gotten my hands on packaging, she can attest. I've said, I can't open this. Like I need assistance here. And what I think is particularly ingenious is what I've seen is they change up the way the security features on the packaging work, like almost seemingly randomly. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but it seems
interesting.
It seems like there's always a better mousetrap that flummoxes me.
Oh, you mean when you get something and you're like, I don't know how to open it?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I think my larger point is I've been really impressed with the industry's emphasis on child safety, and I think, I guess I got to give this, and, we've certainly had the conversation, as the market has grown over the years with our own kids about, look, your minds are growing, right? These are drugs like any other kind of drug, and you should wait until your brain stops growing. Then this is just our opinion, but you should wait until your brain stops growing to use them. These are not for you, right? This is the substance that has a legitimate medical use. People also use it recreationally, like alcohol. So people should talk to their kids. And I think that's an important part of changing minds and shifting the culture. Is being able to talk to children about cannabis.
Isn't it so? Sorry, and I don't mean to take this in a totally different direction.
It's okay if you do.
But it's so interesting. So we stopped drinking earlier this year, but you don't even think about the alcohol industry. People drink around their kids all the time.
All the time.
And I think about partaking in cannabis use around my kids. I'm just I really am not comfortable with this, but it's comfortable to be drinking around your, I don't know. It's very, very strange dichotomy.
And honestly, I think those are some of the things that, I think we're watching this and trying to understand this ourselves.
Yeah.
And trying to understand what role in the social fabric does cannabis play. And to your point about packaging, truthfully, what you're seeing is packaging, every single part of cannabis is just moving a million miles an hour, from packaging where, I'm always talking with my, the co-founders of the company about new packaging options that are less environmentally hostile, more child-proof, that's not cost prohibitive, and that's also not going to just fill the environment with plastic jars. So that's one thing, but I think that's something that Massachusetts has done a fantastic job around, is to create a safety kind of bubble around these products to ensure that underage users don't have access, et cetera, et cetera. But, I also think you guys are bringing up a really interesting point around this massive education aspect. And how do you treat the education? And truthfully, I think, as a teenager who used cannabis probably more than they should have, I was always of the mindset that, well, no, nobody, it's just illegal. And so like, I'm already crossing this line. There's no way, you can't stop me now. But truthfully, I mean, I think there is a lot of part of the emerging research we are seeing is that the brain development process of an adolescent doesn't really close until the age of 24.
Yeah.
And to start meddling in that process earlier is not really going to have great impacts. Could my parents have regurgitated that to me back when I was 16 and, a really naughty kid? Probably not. But would the research have, supporting that statement have had more of an impact on me? 33-year-old me would like to say yes, but, reality could be very different. But I do think that there is a very interesting paradox between the spirits and alcohol industry with the cannabis industry. And I still think we will be with that for a long time until this new generation starts to understand what happens with how the cannabis industry really starts to impact it. And, I was actually recently doing some research around, so this new product that we're working to bring to market. And I think one of the more interesting facts around kind of the emergence of the cannabis industry in legal markets are there is a trade-off with the cannabis or with the spirits industry. After a 10-year, so this is just like a random piece of info that I have saved on my desktop, that a 10-year study of researchers at UConn in 2017 found that in counties where marijuana was legal, cannabis was legalized, wine and beer purchases decreased by 15%. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're in this very interesting changing landscape where we're going to start to see a little bit of a push and pull between these two industries. And furthermore, I think getting back to the product discussion, products are going to bring, it's going to be one thing if you sit down and smoke a joint in front of your toddler or your kid, like that's probably not going to land well, right, no matter how you skin it. But if you are drinking, an infused seltzer that, is going to give you mild effects, no more than a glass of red wine would do, does anybody care?
Yeah.
Right.
And is anybody going to know?
Right.
And I think that's kind of going to be this new forefront of the industry where I think it's going to change in front of our eyes, but we're not going to be watching it. And I think we're already seeing that with the rise of vaporizers and, back in college when it was really hard to use cannabis and not smell like cannabis and telegraph it from red eyes to having it cling to your clothes after, a cold winter's night when you come inside. I actually think the cannabis plant is now, I think we're moving into a very new phase of this. And I think it's, I don't have kids personally, but I think it's an interesting question to pose to parents of how do you engage with this? We, at Theory, we work with the Railroad Street Youth Project, which is an adolescent group in Great Barrington that provides structured activities for kids in need after high school or, during the year in high school. Mm-hmm. And I actually had a very interesting conversation with their executive director about this topic alone. And what she was actually saying was that one of the challenges that she faces or that she discusses a lot is with parents. And, the kids kind of get it to some extent, and the parents sometimes don't get it. And there is a very interesting push and pull in the dynamic of reversing kind of that mentality where one generation has seen this as this illegal thing that will always be illegal with all this baggage. But this new generation is like, wait a minute, this is legal. What do you mean what do you mean it has this history of all these negative and adverse things? And so those are some of the most interesting kind of paradoxes within this industry that, again, we feel a lot of responsibility around. We want to make sure that our products don't end up in the hands of people that they shouldn't. I mean, even if a customer says that they're buying on behalf of someone, like there's a really good chance that we're not going to let that transaction go through because we don't want to set a precedent. The same way that you can't just give $10 to the guy in the corner to go buy you a case of beer.
Right.
I never did that. But the same rules apply within the industry, and I think that's where we will not flex on that, because I think we as a legal entity, we don't want to give any opportunity for someone to say, well, you guys didn't do your part, because I think we're working very hard to do our part.
Yeah, and personally, the thing I want to see, right, is an honest, objective national education campaign around this plant.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know who are the right people to do it. I'm not saying any of that. But what I don't want are the capitalist competitors to cannabis to continue to be able to drive the narrative, right? Because it's been so damaging, and I just I think we can get there. So
You're gonna lead it.
yeah, I'm running ideas around in my mind
All
about
right, all right,
cannabis
all right.
education. I mean, I think we still
Yeah,
need it.
No,
Absolutely.
100%.
we definitely need it. Yeah, we absolutely
Yeah.
need it more than anything. I mean, I think this is like, and again, I think education goes through not just with kids. I think it also gets down to, social equity and making it inclusive.
Yeah.
That's something people need to be educated on. This cannot be an industry that goes to the highest bidder, period. And I think that's a part of education that I think people are still didn't realize that could be a problem. But again, added complexities of the industry that I wouldn't trade for anything in the world.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you about when I was kind of combing through the Theory Wellness website was about your outdoor growing operation. This seems to be a unique thing in right now, at least in this region. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Oh yeah. So I mean, talk about that was probably planting that first outdoor field was, this probably my second greatest memory to walking into the indoor cultivation and seeing rooms of like cannabis plants. And a lot of, again, I think part of the chasing of the evolution of this industry and being a more conscious player in this industry is figuring out how do we start to create more sustainable habits around an industry that is, has, little guardrails in terms of manufacturing, in the sense that we're big and, we use a lot of water, we use a lot of electricity. And so I think as we started to look at various models of how do you start to kind of grow beyond just your indoor walls. And certainly out west, you see sun-grown cannabis as this beautiful sunset terroir, like the Napa Valley regions of wines in the cannabis industry. We started to think, okay, well, what does that look like on the East Coast, and is it feasible? And we started to do some research around what does it really look like to do cannabis in Massachusetts outdoors. So, getting back to the point where cannabis is extremely cost prohibitive. To run a farmer isn't necessarily going to have the capital to get a license to then go grow cannabis. Like it's a high barrier for entry. So we actually partnered with a local farmer who's a 35-year organic grower of mescaline greens in Sheffield, Mass, which is, not far from our Great Barrington store. And so we actually partnered with him because we wanted to create a sustainable model where a dispensary like us, we didn't need to go out and buy a farm and just do it all from scratch. We wanted to work with someone who actually had been cultivating an organic soil for 35 years in a very unique microclimate that lent itself very well to growing a cannabis plant. And so from that partnership, working off of his soil and this terroir that he had created, this soil is part of was carved from glaciers, thousands of years ago. It has a natural aquifer that runs beneath it. There's a river across the road from it that cycles humidity off of it. I mean, this beautiful climate. And so then we also did the research on what kind of genetics of plants, what types of cannabis plants would then thrive in this kind of unique climate. So then once you start to put all these pieces together, we launched the first, I think we had the first approved outdoor farm in Massachusetts. I think we were the second to put plants in the ground. And so for us, this was accomplishing a couple of different things. One, this was really putting Mother Nature back in the driver's seat of facilitating the growth of the plants that she created. We decrease the amount of electricity that we need because obviously the sun does most of the work. We limit the amount of hydration and water that goes through the fields. We also take regenerative processes, like we do no-till soil, so we're not digging up and turning the soil over every season. We let the roots decompose in the ground. We plant companion plants like lemongrass and sage and lavender to attract natural pollinators, and also to lure predator insects away from the cannabis plants to these other more desirable plants. And so for us, this was this wonderful opportunity to start to understand how do we take another step in a direction where we hope others will follow us in terms of creating, a future of different types of sustainable cannabis. And it's been really kind of fascinating to watch this project, because when cold snaps come and humidity comes and freak, 50-mile-an-hour windstorms come, we're all definitely thinking about those plants. But ultimately, I think what it starts to do is, one, the model I think can be replicated by other dispensaries if they were interested in doing so. And two, I think this is actually probably going to be closer to the future of cannabis that we'll see in the long run. And so that project for us was incredible. It's insane to watch.
How many crop cycles have you been able to do out there?
Oh, that's a really good question. So we have one major season, obviously, in the summer.
Yeah,
We're not
right.
growing stuff.
Yep.
But we have 3 greenhouses out there. One of which is a light deprivation greenhouse, which we can run plants for a longer cycle on, where they could potentially go into the ground earlier than the fields do and then finish much later in the year. We also have mother plants that we're running in there that we maintain all year round. And so I think, almost every year we're evolving the process of what cultivation looks like. And we're learning too. I mean, there's no question, like, New England is she can be tough on you from, with weather. And so, there's always a little bit of inherent risk in cultivating outdoors, but we always are. I mean, again, like, we want to try to be conscious in the sense that we are thinking about, okay, how can we try to be more sustainable in this area? And we're actually we have opened a brand new production facility that is, we've negotiated a contract where all of our electricity is going to be run off of renewable wind energy. So our electricity, I mean, and again, I think these are the kind of things that we're thinking about as an operation, as a young brand who's trying to do right in this industry. Yeah. These are the kind of actions that we're very much, our thoughtfulness, I think we try to translate into reality. And the farm is a good example of this. The renewable energy, wind energy, powering our plant is another one. So, but the farm is a pretty incredible project that I wish I could tell you how amazing it is on like a summer day and blue skies to just be out in a field of cannabis. I mean, it's unlike anything you could ever imagine.
Well, we're open to podcaster site visits, of course. What
we could probably make that happen for you.
I'd love to do a field interview once we get beyond COVID. That would be so interesting. One thing I wanted to ask about that, I mean, thinking about trying to grow outside in New England, I imagine that's where your knowledge of genetics and plant breeding has to come into effect, right? You start beginning to think about, maybe we need a more mountainous strain because we're up at almost 1,000 feet or something like that.
Oh yeah, and that's a huge part of this process. I think it's, you're not going to buy White Widow seeds and then try to grow them outside and be like, oh, well, this is definitely going to be successful. Yeah. This is where, it actually may, there could be a chance. But anyway, one thing that the beauty of this plant is that it is resilient. Mm-hmm. It is a hard worker and it provides for itself. And so if you can facilitate the right environment for it to thrive, there's a very good likelihood that it will thrive. Mother Nature being, unpredictable and unruly at times will always leave something up to chance for you. But what we try to do is we try to create the most ideal surroundings for these plants to thrive in. And that is everything from looking at, the genetics and, past cultivation experiences. We've talked to growers, across the country about what are the best outdoor genetics that could potentially work in an environment such as New England. We looked at microclimates similar to New England climates and tried to figure out where does that land in terms of genetic development with certain types of cannabis plants. And, we even worked with some of the breeders who are out there. There's one breeder I don't think can't really mention his name because I don't want to put him on blast or anything, but he was actually really fundamental in chatting with us about some of the plants that he was actually cultivating that were really outdoor geared plants based off of landrace genetics that were very adaptable to the New England climate. And so having his input, and then obviously we have great teams of cultivators. And, I think when you talk to people who know how to grow cannabis, they have a really good sense of this. And that's personally the genetics side of things within the industry is probably one of the other fascinating areas that I don't think people fully understand to this point. But a lot of that kind of strategic thinking and doing the research to try to create that perfect setting and that surrounding, there's so many different variables, and you try to control what you can. And we've been really fortunate. And someone I'm not by any means a green thumb, but I run cannabis plants in my backyard every summer just so I can personally learn more about this plant and just see the magnificence of what it looks like to start with a seed, and all of a sudden by the end of the summer see this 14-foot tall plant that's beautiful. So we try to do the same thing.
Yeah, I have to say, there's something special about it. I mean, I got into this, again, we're talking decades ago. And I don't know, I want to say, like, there's almost something spiritual about raising up this plant into a medicine or something you're going to use recreationally or in another aspect. And I'm sorry, Stomping Jen, you're looking at me skeptically, but I think it goes back to this ancient relationship that we have as human beings with this plant. It's like when you have a dog in your house. Like, it's hard. It's hard for me to describe. It feels like there's a part of you had a missing piece of your brain. A dog-shaped piece of your brain was missing, and somebody plugged it in. Once you get a dog, like, what? That's how I feel. So I just want to just finish. Like, there's something about, I think, working with the plant and seeing it, and that I can't describe it beyond to say that it was a spiritual experience for me. And then being able to give it to people, and I don't know.
100%.
That's how I felt.
Wait, Satu, I have to agree with you on this, in a huge way, because I think, honestly, I again, talking about this educational process, I learn more from growing the plant because every day I get home from work, it's the first thing I want to see. I want to go to the backyard. I want to see how it's grown. I want to see the progress.
Yeah.
But then where it goes even further is I gave cuttings of the plant that I grew from seed to very close friends who were going to preserve that lineage of a plant that I started that is now making its way into a network of friends who are then also going to enjoy this. And there is something so spiritual to me about that, where we're creating a community around a product that we are literally giving away to our peers.
Yeah.
And I think there is something that is so beautiful about that process, that it's not necessarily like tomatoes, and it's not like growing lettuce and arugula. Certainly there's some elements of that, but there's something deeply personal that I find about the cannabis plant, that it kind of almost goes back to this counterculture need, where once you discover someone else who shares that passion, there's a bridge made that is a connection. And I think I get the same way with the cannabis plants, and sharing those buds with my friends and family. And honestly, cutting down my plants when it was time for harvest was one of the biggest bummers of my year. And I was like, wait a minute, this ends? So I gotta cut this thing down, I gotta hang it, and then I gotta trim it. Oh man. But I think you're onto something where I understand. I think I get where you're coming from with this too. I think I feel that
puzzle piece.
What do you think, Stomping Jen? What were you gonna say?
No, I just had so many thoughts. Like when you were talking about farming,
yeah,
and I think about all of the people who would grow it illegally, and over the years, and they had specialties, and then I think about buying it in college or whatnot, and you just get stuff, you don't know what it is, they just give it to you in a bag. You're like, okay, thank you. Those are some of the thoughts that I had. Then I remembered this time in college where some people that I was hanging out with, they found like somebody's grow operation and they like totally stole the plants. And like I went
Yeah.
to some house in the middle of the
Oh.
night. I know. Well, I mean, looking back, I
Yeah.
didn't know. I just went with my friends to this people's house and
Yeah.
this thing was just happening. I don't know. But
No,
like,
not,
you know,
not,
like
that
what,
wasn't directed at you. Yeah.
no, but I'm just saying it's just, you know, like you think about these weird experiences that you have
Mm-hmm.
in life that you'll never, I mean, that will never ever happen again.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's one of the beauties of of something like Theory Wellness, right?
Right.
Is you can walk in there and know exactly what you're getting. There's no,
Right.
you don't have to worry about,
Yeah.
what's in the bag,
I have no
Yeah.
idea what's in the bag.
I mean, and
Yeah.
that's one of the,
What is it going to do to me? I don't know.
right. And it's interesting, like now, having gone through my own educational process around the plant and all of that stuff, like I know why, my mind was racing that time. It's because it was probably a sativa dominant or entirely sativa strain, right? Like, and like now, and this goes back to my point before about education.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
if I feel like if I had a little more education at the time, I would have been more prepared to understand my own experiences, and I have to say, I want to make kind of a fun point, Thomas. Like one of the things I absolutely love about this industry is the creativity around the names of different strains. Like
Oh my
I
gosh.
was looking on the Theory Wellness website and I looked at some of the ones that I really loved, like lemon, banana, sherbet, popcorn. That's awesome. Cookies and cream.
Yeah, that's insane. Yeah.
Grape glue, watermelon gelato. Can you shed any light on how these names are selected?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. How much time do you have? No, I'm just
Yeah.
So actually, this is when I was saying that, the whole lineage side of the industry and kind of the genetic side of something that I've become very fascinated with is actually specifically around the naming conventions. So, basically what each of those names for the most part is a representation of the creation of a new type of cannabis plant. So every time a breeder takes one plant, puts it with another, breeds them, creates a new type of plant, you got a new name. So, everything from White Widow to, Super Lemon Haze. I mean, all of the names that you were just mentioning, you'll actually see in a lot of our descriptions with those strains. I actually do a lot of the writing of the descriptions, or I did until very recently, where I would actually go do the research and say, okay, what is grape ape? What are the two parent genetics? Is it this and this? And then you start to learn the nuance of what that combination starts to look like. So there are some strains that are literally just like Mai Tai crossed with I-95, and that is what it is. Some of them get pretty absurd names just because the breeders choose what they want to call them. Okay. But ironically, what those strain names are actually representing is this cross-pollination and the breeding of different genetics of cannabis plants to then create more interesting plants. And so, one of the things that we've actually been talking a lot about, or not a lot, but it's been a discussion, is about preserving kind of the heirloom landrace genetics. So a lot of the strains that have, geographical terms laden in with their names. So, Panama Red, Acapulco Gold. I mean, some of these older strains, those were strains that were literally found in Acapulco that were golden, and they grew them and they said, oh, we're going to call this Acapulco Gold. All right, great. But then you also have, you could bring an Acapulco Gold back into the States and somebody could say, ooh, I've got this Northern Lights. Let's cross the Acapulco Gold with the Northern Lights and then see what happens. And the breeders are the ones who are controlling this kind of genetic puzzle and building on it. And so a lot of the times what you're going to find is there are certain strains that have more prolific kind of lineages than others. White Widow is definitely, one of the, what I would consider is like one of the most old school strains. I think it was like a Brazilian landrace that was crossed with like a South Indian indica, and it was just like whoever got those seeds and ran a male against a female that created White Widow, created something that was so wonderful that people unanimously said, "Ooh, this is a great flower strain." And so, those names, White Widow, I don't know how that really came about to be White Widow, but ostensibly it was because of there's probably some story behind it. Some of those names you can kind of tell instantly what are the genetics of that plant and where did it come from. Other ones you're like, wait a minute, what is this thing that they're talking about? Like, I have no idea why the strain is called like roadkill skunk, other than probably has some skunk heritage, probably smells it's probably got like a really dense terpene profile that is like super, super potent that you can smell, through the jar. And so actually the diversity of some of the flower that we see has been really interesting. And then you have kind of this, what I think probably most consumers who are buying the legal markets know about, cookies. The Girl Scout cookie, Thin Mint cookies, there is a brand by Burner called Cookies. Cookies is an entire billion-dollar company based off of one strain of cannabis.
Wow.
And so, when one person starts running cookies against if you're a breeder and you get a cut of cookies and you start running it against your favorite plant, you just start to create a very large tree that starts to move all the way through the industry. And so I find this stuff really, really interesting, but I also think it comes at a trade-off too, where if you start to overbreed these plants, where you are breeding out you're breeding in high THC and removing equal amounts of CBD, I think there's a little bit of a trade-off in that process. I always joke with my dad about dad weed. My dad's weed is like, my dad likes a joint where he could smoke a whole joint and not feel like he needs to go to the loony bin. Like, he wants to have something that's well balanced and like, not going to throw him off too far. And a lot of the reason why he has that experience with cannabis is because back in the day when you had these land races, they were CBD and they were THC in fairly equal amounts. And so one never really overtook the other. And you got that kind of cool stoniness that was more of, Spicoli from Fast Times, more so than it is like heavy sedation of the modern era that we have at times today with cannabis. And so, a lot of that comes back to this genealogy of cannabis plants that is so fascinating.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to talk to your, theory, wellness, sales rep or representative,
because it's not like getting a baggie in college,
right? About what you're looking.
Definitely not. Yeah,
about what you're looking. And talk to somebody about what you're looking for. Like, if you're looking to have a pseudo psychedelic experience, maybe you want a close to 30% THC strain, but maybe you don't. And so that's the importance of having conversation and dialogue, and why it's important we have an organization like Theory Wellness there. We could talk to them about this stuff. So Thomas, where do you see Theory Wellness going? Where do you see the industry going over the years? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that's a question I wish I knew the answer to. I think it's hard to say, because I think this industry changes so quickly and so fast. And what I would hope, for Theory Wellness is, I hope we can continue. At the end of the day, we think cannabis access for all is incredibly important. We are lucky enough to be in a position where we can scale, where we're at a place where we're generating revenue. That revenue gets reinvested into our employees, our processes, and then our growth. And so it's not like we have fat cats who sit at the top who just, munch on their cigars and say, we're going to take this thing to the moon.
Right.
We're actually trying to consciously scale our operation to help be a leader in this industry. So I hope over time, we stay on this path of developing really good products, really fortifying kind of who we are as a company. When you look at our life cycle, 5 years old as a brand is not long compared to most brands that have been around for 25 years. We're kind of in our infancy of who we're becoming. And so I hope we can navigate the future ahead of us of expansion in a very conscious way that puts our employees, our patients, and our consumers, at the top of our mind. I think with the industry as a whole, I really do hope with some of the states that are considering legalization or medical provisions or decriminalization, I think if they are starting to consider a full recreational rollout, I think equity provisions have more importance today than they have ever in the cannabis industry.
Yeah.
I think you have one shot for legalization and you got to get it right. Then I can only hope that, people start to pay attention, start to get involved, and to really start to challenge the logic behind what legalization stands for and what it means today. And so, I hope the best for the industry. I really do. I'm really excited about it. I'm bullish about where it's going. But I'm also not without reservations on ensuring that, with this kind of growth and power and trajectory and something so unprecedented, I hope people pay attention to try to get it right. And I hope that we take the time to get it right. And even the MORE Act, I think the MORE Act was a brilliant piece of legislation.
Yeah.
We're not ready for it yet.
Yeah.
But I hope by the time that we are ready, I hope we approach it in a way that is thoughtful, equitable, and promotes a free market the way that cannabis was intended, where people buying cannabis get that expression of feeling like they're sharing something very important with others. Because as soon as we lose that, the industry definitely becomes something that I don't know that it was intended to be.
Yeah. And and thank you. That was a great answer. And I want people to appreciate too, that like what we're seeing here is a cultural revolution, right? This is the people across our nation saying enough is enough.
Yeah.
This plant has been treated unfairly. We've been treated unfairly. We're demanding something different. And I think it's important to pause and appreciate that. I really do. Stomping Jen is snapping. Thank you. And Thomas too. Thank you. So, all right. 2 fun questions for you. Unrelated to cannabis, although they could be, I guess. Help us as we're wrapping up. Help us to get to know you a little bit better. What do you like to do for fun when you're not working at Theory Wellness?
Oh boy. I mean, I work a lot, so work is fun.
Yep.
But truthfully, I reserve my cannabis usage to the weekends. So I actually like to complement. One of my favorite things to do is exercise and use cannabis while exercising. There's no better balance in my mind of using physical exercise to complement a really good sativa that then has a good hybrid afterwards when you're recovering, and then an indica to put you to sleep. I love exercise, but I also listen to lots of audiobooks throughout the weekend. So, between cannabis, exercise, and audiobooks, that's probably where you would find me, either in the backyard, out trail running, cross-country skiing, pretty much anything, or sitting at my desk too, working. But work is also more fun.
I need to point out to people that Thomas is not trying to deceive us. He has been drinking out of the largest water bottle I've ever seen.
Oh my God. Now people are going to know it's definitely me. This is the most, I know, this is like ridiculous.
That's probably half a gallon. It's huge.
Yeah, it's 64 ounces of just pure ice
you called it.
Water.
Yep.
Half a gallon.
Anyway, so he's not deceiving us. Okay. All right. Last question, and you're free to interpret this any way you want. It's not a trick question by any means. What have you seen that you cannot explain?
Oh, wow. Boy.
It can be anything.
Yeah. I have definitely, so I lived in Wyoming for 2 years in big sky country, spending time camping, with no light pollution. I have seen things in the sky that I find very hard to justify or believe. So I'll leave it at that.
I am a big proponent of UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon. I've been following this subject closely for years, and through our podcast, we've identified several potential candidates for a UAP episode. So we're going to put you on the list.
Oh, you're going to do a full-on episode about this?
Absolutely.
Can I get a
Stomping
pass?
Jen. No, you have to sit through it. All right. Well, thank you for answering that question. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I am with you. I think there are things out there. So we can talk more about it on the UAP episode. All right.
Oh my goodness.
Thomas,
Short list. You're on the short list now.
Thomas Winstanley from Theory Wellness. First of all, thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
We are at an hour and 40 minutes. I could have gone another hour and a half with you. But I have to respect your time. It's late in the evening. So
it's all good.
Thank you for talking to us about what I see as incredibly important work, both for Massachusetts, Maine, our New England cousin, and also society writ large. Like I really think what companies like Theory Wellness are doing are super important.
Yep.
So thank you so much for that. Thank you for coming on and talking to us about this. I hope people have learned a lot.
Yep.
I enjoyed the conversation.
Yep.
Stomping Jen.
Yes.
As
Hi.
always, thank
What's
you.
up? Hi.
Thank you. You.
What did I do?
You interjected and made insightful comments and asked important questions.
That is my job.
So I appreciate having you here.
I appreciate you.
To our listeners.
Wait, you're just glossing over that.
Go ahead, please.
You don't want me to read?
I do.
Poor Thomas.
Let's stop
torturing every minute of this.
Let's stop torturing him.
All right.
To our listeners, we love you. Thank you for continuing to be fans and listening and supporting us.
And subscribe.
We have some great stuff in the works.
Yeah, we do.
After 2 years, I have finally purchased our web domain.
We're going to do that project.
Yeah, we have T-shirts, we have swags, we have things in the works. So we're
keep tuned for the new year.
But we're trying to focus on excellent content, like with our friend from Theory Wellness here.
We are.
Okay, so last thing, please support Theory Wellness if you are a medical cannabis user or a recreational cannabis user. Go check them out. Okay.
Yes.
And they will take care of you.
Yes.
Okay, without the further ado, Stomping Jen, what do we say?
We love you. Wear a mask.
Wear a mask. Be safe.
Get vaccinated.
Yep.
Bye now.
Bye now.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. America knows that this world of ours, ever growing smaller, must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate. Those who have freedom will understand also its heavy responsibility. That all who are insensitive to the needs of others will learn charity, and that the sources, scourges of poverty, disease, and ignorance will be made disappear from the earth. And that in the goodness of time, all peoples will come to live together in a peace guaranteed